Okay, let me see if I can get this off my chest, maybe lance this particular boil that's been irking me for some time now with regard to essence of thought. I'm not going to make this a public video. I'm going to just make this video for my patrons and for one or two select other people that I'd like to say this to, because I'm venting something that I feel, and that I feel that nobody else, it's like the elephant in the room that nobody is saying here with regards to him. And I won't make that a public video. Why? Because I don't want him to respond to it, because I don't think he has the legitimacy to respond to somebody when I've made numerous videos critiquing and criticising some of the things that he's saying, challenging him and saying that he's misrepresenting things. And when people have tweeted that to him or mentioned it to him, he says, I refuse to even engage with this Noel Plum person. I know that he's a dishonourable and dishonest person, and I won't even watch his videos. So it would irk me somewhat if, having taken that stance, which has afforded him the chance to ignore every single thing that I've said, if he was then to respond to this and become all sort of, oh my God, what terrible things Noel Plum's saying about me. This is how terrible it is being me. Blah, de, blah, de, blah. I don't think he should have that chance to do that. Also, for my patrons particularly, I won't be making any more pledged videos this month. I've only made one this month. I've only made about 2 a month for the past few months. I hope to get back into more regular production next month. But I do only bill per video, so you're not paying for me to make things that I haven't made. But it is the summer holidays and it's family time at the moment, so I'm finding it hard to sort of get myself together and make videos on a regular basis. But I want to talk about this, because I think this is in some ways the elephant in the room with regard to essence of thought and his, shall we say, trans status. And I'm not questioning his trans status, just let me say that. I accept that his status as a gender fluid person, given that he was not assigned as gender fluid at birth, means that he is technically trans. I accept that. But I think there's a kind of elephant in the room here which nobody is talking about, and maybe with good reason, because he'd try and leverage it for his own gain, the same as he pretty much does anything that anybody says. There seems to be two camps of people who deal with him. On the one camp, you've got the sort of hardline anti-trans brigade, but it's a disparate series of groups that have one beef or another, who will sort of say, essence of thought, well, he's a man. If you're male, you're a man. He's a man. It's all a load of old bollocks, blah. Then on the other side, you've got other people that are more sensitive and more on board with these issues. I would regard myself in that camp. And that camp seems to very much pussyfoot around him and talk about him as a trans person as they would anybody else who is a trans person. And yet I propose that there are some huge, manifest, tangible differences between his trans identity as somebody who is gender fluid, non-gender binary, especially in the way that he chooses to instantiate it, and there is in terms of most people who identify as trans women or indeed trans men, and that a lot of the issues that we talk about with other people simply don't apply to him, and yet he seems to happily add them to his burden as if he's suffering the same kind of existential dangers as everybody else. Let me try and explain what I mean with that. Let me start off with an anecdote, because this was something that impacted on me a few years ago now, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, at a gym I used to go to. And I was leaving the gym, and in the car park there was a trans woman getting out of a car going into the gym. She already had her gym kit on, despite the fact that there are substantially great changing facilities there. She was all ready to go. And my initial thought was, it's a bit odd, because where I come from, sort of rural England, you don't see much diversity of any sort, really, to tell you the truth. So she stood out in that regard. She also stood out because I thought, well, she wasn't the most convincing trans woman, let's say, because she was in her late 50s, early 60s, and clearly this had been a recent thing because you know how guys get older and their noses start to grow, nostrils extend, ears get a bit bigger. The later you leave it, I think, transitioning from a man to a woman, the longer those hormones have had the chance to take effect, the harder it is, I think, physically to pass, I think is the term that's often used. And I watched her walk across the car park and into the gym, and it was one of those things that was kind of one of those things that you see and you think about, but then you keep returning to in your mind every few days, every few hours, just keeps coming back to. Months later, years later, thinking about that and thinking about the hardships that she would have. And actually, once the initial sort of thing, one of the first things I thought was like, what a lot of balls that takes. Maybe that's not the right word to use, but you know what I mean. What a lot of bottle you have to have. It's easy for me to walk in the gym. It's hard enough if you're not used to going in a gym, walking in a gym in actual fact, because it can be quite intimidating places. But how hard is that to do that? How hard must that be? What a difficult, tough environment to negotiate as a trans person with changing rooms and toilets. And she's obviously wearing a wig. So swimming's going to be an issue, wearing some makeup, but you get sweaty and then the makeup's an issue, and the makeup is trying to disguise just how masculinized her aged male face has become. And just thinking how fucking hard that must be, and how much, you know, spine, backbone you must need to do that. Fucking hell. You know, a lot of bottle to do that. And it started making me think, it set me on a little bit of a journey, just thinking how hard all these different environments must be. There is no environment where it isn't immediately obvious. Every time she leaves the front door, right, it's you've got to be on your A game, you know, because you're going to stand out and people are going to be looking and people are going to be thinking, and they're going to address you in different ways that don't match up with your gender identity and all this kind of thing. And it was a bit of a revelation to me, I've got to say, in terms of, I suppose, I don't want to puff these things up because I'm not like that, but in terms of the respect and the sort of me thinking about all the things that were involved in that. And the reason that I say that is that when I look at Essence of Thought, I don't see any of that. I see somebody who sits on the back of that and talks about the fact, he'll say things like he's in danger of violence whenever he leaves his front door, and how, you know, the difficulties of trans people and all this kind of thing, as if it all applies to him, and yet fucking none of it seems to apply to him. He seems to want to take on all of that and to be able to laud it as if, you know, look how terribly oppressed I am. And yet when I look at him, all these different things don't seem to apply to him, because what he effectively is, he is a biological male who looks like a slightly androgynous man, but nevertheless a man, right? He's not going to go outside and anybody's going to think, I would suggest, that he's anything other than a man. He doesn't wear makeup, he doesn't style himself to try and look like we would expect in our cultural norms a woman would look like. And he doesn't try and style how you address him in any way, which challenges. So he's never ever going to be challenged, is he? It's kind of an irony. He's happy for you to call him Peter. He's happy for you to call him Ethel. You can call him he. You can call him she. You can call him they. It's almost as if I don't want to appear totally cynical. It's almost as if he's gone out of his way to make it as easy as possible so there is as few difficult scenarios for him as possible, which is fine. I don't blame him for doing that, right? It's not as if you have to go through life making things tough for yourself, and it's not as if being trans you've got to have been punched in the nose so many times before you're a legitimate trans person. Of course not. So I don't mind that. But I don't see how you can do that and then kind of ride on the backs of people who genuinely do have to put up with these things. You know, it's an irony, but it is more likely for me to be misgendered than it is for Essence of Thought to be misgendered, because it is literally impossible to misgender him. You can call him Peter, you can call him Ethel, you can call him he, you can call him she, you can call him they, you can address him as madam, you can address him as sir. It is literally impossible to misgender him. He can leave his house. Nobody is going to beat him up on the grounds that he's trans, because nobody is going to suspect he's trans when he leaves the house any more than they are going to suspect that I am trans when I leave the house. It's an absolute... it just comes across as an absolute load of horseshit. Not that he's trans, but that in some ways he wants to dress his trans identity up as if it is some way indistinguishable from the trans identities, particularly of people who are trans women, who, it just seems to me, tell me if I'm wrong, but must have it 1,000 times worse than he has it, and all the different things, all those different units of difficulty in their lives that we can all see, and most of us appreciate, even people that are somewhat cynical of the concept can at least understand how difficult some of these scenarios must be. Surely there's no way that any of this applies to him. He couldn't have it any easier, really. And it just seems like everybody, I just feel, tell me if I'm wrong, like everybody must be looking at his videos and seeing him talking about himself as trans and being oppressed and all the terrible things, and his human rights as a trans person, and the dangers of violence and suicide and dysphoria caused by the way society treats him. And I just think this is a load of bollocks, because he isn't standing out. He doesn't need to pass, because what's he passing as? He just looks like slightly androgynous bloke, and that's fine. Treat him as slightly androgynous bloke. He's fine with that, because you can treat him however you like. He's sort of formulated his own set of rules that just means that all these awkward and difficult situations, all these things that could negatively impact upon him, just are going to slide past him like water off a duck's back, quite honestly. And it seems like nobody dares mention that, because I think everybody understands that he would just leverage that into some horrific, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this about me, saying this about a trans person. Here I am suffering here, right? Suffering these terrible injustices. And I just don't fucking buy it. I just don't fucking buy it. I'm not suggesting that he's on a wind-up, or that he isn't trans, or that he isn't genuine in how he feels about his gender identity. I'm not suggesting any of that. All I'm saying is that I have watched his fucking videos now for the best part of 10 years, right? While all this has been going on, and not one fucking thing has changed. He doesn't look any different. He doesn't sound any different. You don't have to address him in any different way. When he walks out the door, nobody's going to treat him differently to how they were treating him 8 or 9 years ago. And that just seems so far removed from the kind of oppressions that he's claiming for himself that it just sticks in my throat a little bit. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, really. To those of you who are my patrons, who most of the people who be watching this are, thank you for your support. That's it. Okay, I'll leave it at that.